Good morning, everyone. This is Jeffe Kennedy, author of fantasy romance and romantic fantasy. I'm here with my first cup of coffee, which is much needed this morning as I'm running behind. I'm here with a very special guest. Uh, Good morning, Lexi.
Good morning, Jeffe. Coffee cheers.
Coffee cheers. I don't know how this will look video wise if we show up side by side or whatever, but people will find out.
We'll find out. Yeah.
So I was realizing as I said that I have no idea how to introduce you because you have layers of names.
Oh, yes. I am like an onion, right? I have layers. You just keep peeling.
Layers or a parfait. I mean,
or parfait.
Everybody likes a parfait.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see. I've never thought of an introduction. You've kind of nailed yours. It's taken a little while, but you've got a good intro.
That's right. It was a work in progress.
It was a work in progress. But I'll say I am Alexia Chantel, author of fantasy, and I'm also A.C. Anderson, author of sci-fi thrillers.
Ooh, that sounds pretty good. And you have a pizza oven.
And we have a pizza oven. Yes. So that when I'm in front of the pizza oven, I am sous chef to Hanson Bakes Bread. I just, make the pizzas and he cooks them and takes all the glory for it. But that's okay.
Well, as long as you can sit by and drink wine, that's what's important.
That is the important part. And I'm really good at that. So, yeah.
And so you live in Michigan?
I am in Minnesota.
Minnesota, one of those MI states.
One of those MI states, way up there in the north. And we are in a heat advisory. It's going to be 90 degrees for 2 weeks. I melt. I am a winter person. I need the cold, and this is way too hot for me. So this morning time is about my outside extent, and then I'll hibernate inside. So it was a good time
to have
the
sweet spot, huh?
Sweet spot. Get up early with the fur ball. Call it good.
Who's been pacing around? We haven't seen him, I think, since we started recording, but we know he's there.
He might come back. He always comes back. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've had coffee in person, unfortunately.
Well, I think the last time we met in person, we had champagne.
We did.
And it was in that sidewalk bar in Denver at the RWA conference. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So one thing I talk about a lot on the show is that a writer's career is full of ups and downs. And we were, I think, celebrating because you had just signed with my same agent, with Sarah.
Yeah. That was definitely an up year. That was great. Good summer, champagne, wonderful. But yes, at that point in time, I had been a Golden Heart finalist. RWA used to run a contest, and my historical fantasy was a finalist for that. And with that, and also I had sent her to Mars Strain, then met with Sarah and signed with her, with Nancy Yost. And so everything was starting out. And as an author, you kind of wait for those big milestones. And that big one of getting an agent, if you're a newbie author, you think, okay, that's it. Now I should just smooth sail and just keep going and things will just keep going up. But that's not always the case. There's always more after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's back up just slightly because you had been writing for a while, but before that, you had been doing a lot of book reviewing, right? Which I think is how we met, that it was on the...
Yeah. Reading Between the Wines book club, which I still do author interviews at that blog with the wonderful Crystal. She lives down in Florida, so she can handle this heat far better than I can. But yes, that's how we met originally. Back in, 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in there. It's been a while.
Probably, yeah. Wow, I didn't realize it had been that long, but...
I remember interviewing you before you had done your fantasy stuff, and then it was your secret that you had. And then when your secret came out that you were going to write fantasy, I was so excited because fantasy is my number one genre. I love to read. It's my go-to. So I was just pumped that you were going to dive into fantasy. And
That's so funny. I don't remember that at all.
no, I remember it because it was just for me at that stage. I had dabbled a little bit in writing, and I was just kind of starting. And I remember, I had known you as this romance author, and then all of a sudden you were changing and you were doing this other genre, and it kind of blew my mind. Like, wow, you can do more than one. You don't just have to be in this little pigeonhole. There's other options out there. So for me, I remember very clearly.
Yeah, that's funny because maybe I'm trying to think what that would have been. If it was like 2010 or so, that probably was the Covenant of Thorns books that were going to come out from Karina. And before that, I had like the more erotic stuff, the
Yeah.
contemporary erotic.
Yep.
Huh,
Hmm.
funny.
Yes. Well, and
So,
now
all this time you've,
friends. Yeah.
yeah, now we're friends. Yes. I do remember you doing a video interview with me at one point, like from your in law's house at
Yeah.
Christmas time or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yep. We had wine and got to do a video interview. That was a total fangirl moment. That was so much fun.
Well, and now I get to be the fangirl today because one of the reasons that we're doing this is because one of your many alter egos, AC Anderson, has published a book about Mars, right?
An audiobook, which, that's
Audio.
just how the cookie crumbled. But, it's a sci-fi book, so why not just go right into audio, right? It just seems to fit.
Well, and it's funny
Yes.
because the books that we think are going to be our first books or that are going to be the ones that like launch us never are. So that's kind of a theme that I had been writing fantasy all along, but I couldn't sell those books. I sold the contemporary erotic books first.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that you had also been kind of writing both side by side. Yes,
Yes,
I definitely thought I would sell first.
yeah. The book that
Same as
became
you.
Rogue's Pawn is
Yeah.
the book that I that was like my first novel, and I had been trying to sell that since like 2007.
Huh.
But it was weirdly cross genre.
Yes, which now I think is more common thanks to people like you. But yes, back then it was much cleaner lines in between the genres. Yeah.
Yes, yes, or and that partly that was trad. That
Mhm.
traditional publishing wanted things that way, or the people who sold the books wanted it that way.
Yep.
So all this time, you said you'd been dabbling in fantasy. You were writing fantasy all those years that you were reading books and supporting authors and everything, which I often mention you as being a great model for that because you were always so supportive of my books. And that when I had the opportunity to introduce you to Sarah, I was delighted to do that. And at that point, you won a Golden Heart, didn't you?
I didn't win, but I was one of the finalists, so it was very
That's the
exciting.
thing about
And
those awards is nobody remembers who actually won. They just remember that you were the finalist.
yes, which honestly is so true of those types of awards because when you're in that group, then you gain so much more than just if you had won an award. You gain this group of connections and this group of people that are going through the same things at about the same time, and you usually have similar goals, and that's just huge to be able to talk to people. Which, as I have been able to talk to you here and there, it's invaluable if you're starting out as an author to be able to talk to people and ask them questions, and especially when things aren't going real great and you're struggling and trying to figure things out, you want to know, like, oh, am I totally off the wall here? Is this totally unusual? It's just nice to be able to reach out and get some feedback and hear, because like everybody says, publishing, there's no one way. It's all different. And if you can find out, oh, okay, not everybody is what you picture in your head of publishing where you just step 1, step 2, step 3. Sometimes there's a step 1, then you go to A, then you go to Z, and then you come back to M, and then there's step 2.
And then sometimes you just kind of lose your grip on the ladder entirely and do that thing where you like skid all the way down to the bottom. And
yeah, Bugs Bunny style, just right all the way down.
so you finaled in the Golden Heart, and that was with a story. What story was it?
Historical fantasy. It was titled Awakening the Blades, and it was just about a young British lady who only knew how to pour tea and have perfect manners. And then it's set just on the cusp of Napoleon taking over, and it's the idea of Napoleon has powers, and then his generals have powers, and they can turn people into these mindless creatures that becomes their army, and they want to wipe out the nobility, and she gets caught in crossfire. But, it was romance, so the bodyguard saves her and whisks her away, and then they're on the run and trying to figure out who's causing all of this, and they're tracking them down, and very different from the Mars Strain, which is just near future sci-fi. We've colonized Mars, but we never should have come back.
So when did you write the Mars story?
The Mars Strain I wrote in 2015, 2016. At that time, I was managing a cancer center, multi-location cancer center laboratories, and I was part of a task force because at that time in the world, the Ebola outbreak was happening in Africa. And we were all very...
It's funny, it sounded like evil outbreak.
It was very evil. Evil Ebola, yes. And so the healthcare systems in my metro area were trying to figure out, okay, if someone hops on a plane and ends up here and brings Ebola to Minnesota, how would we handle it? How would we contain it? And so it was a lot of that pre-planning and putting in all of these practices, and then planning of, okay, let's imagine we have somebody here at this location. How are we going to contain it? How are we going to stop the spread? And all of that forward thinking gave me the idea of, well, this could easily happen the way people travel nowadays. Yeah, right, deja vu. And so it got me thinking.
No, I'm actually laughing at Uller in the far background is like chasing something. Yes.
Squirrels, birds. He likes to think he's a mighty hunter. Yes.
He is a mighty hunter.
But he is a mighty hunter because he actually ate a robin. Huskies are not supposed to be able to just snatch birds out of the air.
Oh,
he did. Yeah. And then
poor Robin.
Poor Robin and poor me, who had to clean up the poop for a few days. It was, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I got totally distracted there.
Yeah. So with all that pre-planning, it made me think, okay, well, this could really happen. What if we had already colonized Mars and we bring something back and we accidentally open it, sort of Pandora's box style, and now we release a Martian organism that decimates the planet? And since I am a lab girl and that's my background, and it's one of those jobs that people don't really know much about, but I wanted to kind of raise the curtain a little bit and show people what it's like to work in a lab. I made the superhero of the day, the one who saves the world, a lab girl. So she figures out how to stop the organism.
And is there romance?
There is a central romance. It would be mainstream with romance.
Romantic elements?
So, yep. It is a second chance love story, technically, because her ex-fiance is one of the astronauts that returns from Mars, brings this artifact back, and then they're working together to try to stop it as, people are dying around them and getting infected. So, on top of being an audiobook, it's also quite an eerie timing for it, as we are still coming out of this current real-life pandemic.
Right, right. A lot of people sort of have been in that position of being like, when I wrote about a global pandemic, I didn't really intend.
Right. Didn't actually think it would be happening, but here we are. Mm-hmm.
We are. Although at least we're coming out of it now. So.
Yes. Yep. Here, restrictions have lifted, and I can finally go back to my favorite coffee shops. And
And I wonder how long before we take it for granted again. But right now, it's just so wonderful.
it is, especially now that it's summertime and people want to be outside.
Yep. So, all right. So let's go back. So you had been writing this Mars Strain book around 2015-16. You
Yes.
were also writing the fantasy, and this was like a different fantasy, right? That was the book that Sarah Younger signed you on.
Yes. So when I signed with Sarah, I had my Golden Heart finalist book, The Historical Fantasy, and the Mars Strain. And she loved them both, but she thought the commercial appeal for the Mars Strain was stronger. So we worked on getting that ready, which was so much fun because I had never had the chance to work. I had hired a freelance editor to work on my books, but I had never had this back and forth with somebody, an agent or editor, on ideas and how to strengthen a manuscript. So it was really fun to do that. So we had that. I had signed with her in 2018, which is that really the last time I saw you? 2018. It probably was in Denver. Yeah.
It was Denver 2018?
Denver was 2018 because then I think
Yeah, I think that's right.
New York was 2019. Yep.
Because then New York was 2019, and that was the very last.
The last one. Yep. Yes. So then we went out probably after that time. Some different timelines. Yes. And went out with it and immediately got the interest of a few different audiobook companies. So we knew we had that piece of it, and waited, had it out with publishing houses, had some incredibly nice feedback, but there were passes. And so we went out on another round and continued to get great feedback from these editors. It was really, really nice that they loved my writing. Some of them, it was they already had a title that was too similar on their list, which was something new that I hadn't known of, that, each publishing house will have their collection, their list that releases at certain times, and they don't want books to compete against each other. So if there's already a sci-fi book that is in the similar vein, they don't want to have two of them.
Yeah, it's really frustrating.
Then the pandemic hit, and with everything in publishing kind of had a standstill, with everybody trying to figure out how to work from home and transition. And early on, I don't think reading about a pandemic was really high on anybody's list. So we just pretty much radio silence on that. And so I told Sarah, let's just pull it and we'll go with the audiobook, because I thought, well, that's pretty cool. Get an audiobook. But during all that time before the pandemic, I had finished a high fantasy book that it's Norse mythology inspired. It's Adrian Young, like very high fantasy, multi-realmed. I finished that. It was 2019 for the pandemic, and worked on it, polished it. You read some of it, gave me some great feedback.
I liked it. Yeah.
In the beginning, but pandemic changes things, and you can't fault anybody for that. But it was not beloved by Agent Sarah, and that's just the way it was. And it was really hard. And I had talked to you and called you about that. Of what do you do when your agent, who is supposed to be kind of that first impression that you get, doesn't love
and you're a cheerleader.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. It's that person that is supposed to be your champion and really, rah, rah. Yes, you can do this. This will be great. We'll send it out. We'll do stuff with it. Which, had been the initial take on the ideas, but the actual book just didn't deliver what she was expecting. And, sometimes you read the back blurb of a book and you think, oh, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to love this. And then you start reading it and it's like, oh, no, not really what I was thinking. Doesn't click. And that happens. But as, that was book number 3 that I'd ever written. And it was very difficult. And then, the whole pandemic thing's going on and trying to figure out how to just handle all of that and having kids home and writing at the same time. And so I did take the decision that I would part from Sarah and try find someone who, well, and also I should say, Sarah was wonderful, and she acknowledged that it is, I would consider it a YA crossover book, this high fantasy, and that's not her strong suit. She has always said she is not a YA agent. It's not her expertise. She doesn't sell books in that realm. So I decided that I needed to find an agent that is more knowledgeable in that area. So now 2021 comes, and I have an audiobook that's coming out, and I am in the search for an agent, but I'm not actively looking for an agent. I have a chronic disease that, it takes its toll on me sometimes. And along with that, I do struggle with depression. And it's not something that's fun to talk about, but I feel that it's something that's important for people to hear, because I know so many people that have reached out to me and said, "Oh, I don't know how you do this. I'm feeling the same things." And so even though it's a difficult topic and it's not something that like, "Okay, Mom, I'm all right. Don't worry about me. I'm okay." But it's something that you do want to talk about and acknowledge. And so I had sent out roughly a dozen queries. I got 3 fulls and a partial requested, which was pretty fantastic. In the end, they were all passes, and depression at that time, January, February, March of this year, was hitting me really, really hard. And so I decided
it was a hard time for even people like me who are like, naturally chemically happy. But, here we were, January, February, March is not an awesome time of year regardless. But then we're, still dealing with the pandemic, and we still can't go anywhere or do anything. And we haven't seen any of our people in over a year. And it's, and then all the political stuff. And yeah, so I could just really felt for the people who were already struggling with chronic disease situations, and then depression issues, and then having your career be not what you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like hitting the bottom of that ladder with, you've just bruised your fingers all the way down and landed on your ass.
So now I'm just starting from the bottom, and that's okay. Got help from my doctors and medication. So now things are looking much brighter from my outlook, and I'll start again at some point searching. But right now I'm just taking my time, and I'm writing the second book in that high fantasy series, and also writing.
So you're not giving up on the high fantasy story?
Keep you up on it? Like what the second
You're
one?
Not, sorry, I think we don't completely sync sometimes. You're not giving up on the high fantasy.
No, like I said, I love fantasy. It is my top genre. It is always, when I look at my Goodreads books and review of the year, fantasy is always at the top. It's always my number one genre. And I can't let that one go, because I do love it. And I got wonderful feedback from some fellow authors. You had given me some great help on that opening of it, and other people that had read the whole book. And so I know it's great. And with the feedback that I got from my full requests and the partial, I know that it is a solid book. It's, it's just one of those things of waiting for the right time, the right agent that really knows that they can sell it to the right person, the usual timing of publishing, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Timing is such a huge piece of it.
It is such a huge piece of it. And you've had quite the timing this year too, with a lot of releases, and your recent The Promised Queen release, which I have.
Promised.
Very excited to get my hands on the cover and crack it open, because I can't wait for the big baddie to go down.
Yep, we all look forward to that piece.
Yes.
Well, and so the audiobook, Mars Strain, has been out for a few weeks now. What is time? Who am I?
Yeah, just over a month now. Yep.
Just over a month. Okay.
Yep.
And getting nice responses to it?
Yes, I am not looking at my reviews because
Good girl.
I know mentally I'm just not going to go there. So I don't know what's getting posted, but I have had people that have listened to, I want to say read it. They haven't read it. They listened to it and they've,
It's, I mean, it's still reading, right? I mean, it's,
it counts as a book. It's still a book. It's a version of a book. Yeah.
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 I don't know. There's like always this debate in the community, it seems,
Right.
between, like people who say that listening to an audiobook isn't reading. It's not the same. It's like, fuck off.
It counts. It's the same thing. But yes, I've had some wonderful responses and people telling me that, oh, it's so cinematic. I felt like I was there. I could see it happening. So that's exactly what I wanted. I wrote it.
That's great.
Imagining a summer blockbuster movie, just big action, a lot of stuff going on, a little romance in there, the whole thing. So yeah, that's been fun.
And it's a funny thing for having an audio only release, that the audio people jumped on it right away, but the print people didn't necessarily. Audio is a lot more expensive to produce.
It is. And that there were 3 audio houses that wanted it right away.
3, wow.
3 of them, which was amazing. And yeah, and then so I went with Recorded Books. They won out. They're the best. And they have Morgan Hallett doing the audio for it, which, what is it, 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon type thing. A good friend of mine who used to work for ASCP, which is the certification for my clinical lab science degree. He mentioned, hi Gary, he mentioned that he actually went to school with Morgan Hallett. And it's like, oh, how funny. It's a small world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, it's all very exciting. And I think even though it feels like you may have slipped down the ladder, this is, it's a dip. And that's what I always want to talk about is that, there is no golden moment where you've made it.
Right. Yep.
And getting an agent is great. And, and I'm still sorry that it didn't work out with Sarah. And I know Sarah is sorry too.
Yeah. As a person, I love Sarah. She's fantastic. And it's one of those connections that now I'll always have, and I can always cheer for her and all of her wonderful authors because she has some amazing, wonderful authors such as yourself. And so every time I get to see a deal announcement, I do my little fangirl squeeing and get all excited and add my book to my list so that I can keep track of them all. Yeah. But I always say the highs are not high unless you have lows. So that's okay. It's part of the cycle of it, and it's still fun, right? An audiobook is very exciting. I got to buy a special cupcake for it and spend a day celebrating it, and yeah.
No, the audiobook is awesome, and I know you've gotten involved with like Mary Robinette Kowal and the Lady Astronaut Club and all of that.
Yep. You never know when you put something out there, what's going to happen to it.
Yes.
That same way every time you put a book out there. You never know what doors it's going to open, what people it's going to bring your way. And it's fun to see because it's just not something that you can predict. It just happens.
Yep. Life is a complex biological system on every level.
That's true. That's true.
So I will put the cover of the Mars Strain on the show notes and link to it. And it's been really lovely having you here on the podcast, sharing our first cup of coffee.
It's been great having coffee with you again, Jeffy. Hopefully we'll get to do it again in person soon.
Or
even champagne. Let's shoot for champagne. Why not?
There's no reason we couldn't do both.
That's true. I'm fully open to that. Yes.
All right. Well, I'll remind everyone that First Cup of Coffee is part of the Frolic Media Podcast Network, and you will find other podcasts you love at frolic.media/podcasts. Go check out Lexi as AC Anderson with the Mars Strain audiobook, a cinematic, rollicking science fiction thriller that will delight your earbuds. And thank you so much for being here today, Lexi.
Thank you, Jeffy. Hope you have a good week.
Okay, you too.
Thanks.
And you all take care. Bye-bye.